Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Thank you to Tom for joining us to answer some of the questions that we've had that come up since our webinar. And this segment is about a book called Willing Wisdom. And you can get a copy of the book, of Tom's book, by contacting us. We'll send you a complimentary copy of the book. Many of you may have already read it. And so this segment, Tom, is to ask some of the questions that we've been bombarded with in the last little while. And so welcome, and how are you?
Awesome. Great to be back.
Fantastic. So my first question is, it's this generational thing. So this client says, I'm a baby boomer. So that means I'm 60-ish. I'm not admitting my true age here. My kids fall into the Gen X and Y kind of thing, and how do I motivate my kids to take this wisdom forward? Because the more I read about this stuff, this isn't, they don't think the way I think.
Yeah, it's a really interesting generational question. I mean, certainly baby boomers grew up listening to their parents talking in Technicolor about the Great Depression, certainly talking about the Second World War. They had grandparents who were, in the First World War. They were gathering stories. Life was hard. Life was, it was just another tragedy coming. And so that was hard baked into a generation. It was all about working hard, spending less than you make. There's a disaster coming. You better be prepared. And that just, man, that was in our DNA. But they had kids. Boomers had kids, and as you said, X and Y's, and they heard some of this stuff, but they really experienced nothing but pretty steady growth. Public education, university enrollment went up, huge strides forward in our healthcare system. Like, life was pretty good. Abundance of jobs in the 80s. A little bit of a challenge in the early 90s with that depression. But it has become a generational challenge for boomers to tell their kids what it was like to grow up with little, or certainly not as much as their children have. But the reality is, I think the way in which we can switch on that generation is actually to tell those stories, is to re-engage those children back into those stories of the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s and the heart and the challenges. I mean, now this generation who is living through a pandemic is going to have their own horror story to share with their children, right? Finally, that big awful event came. And it's all, if you go right back through history, it has always been with us, these ebbs and flows of economic expansions and difficult times. And it is a theme that I think successful families keep alive and well, especially families that have been successful in creating wealth. They are quick to transition wealth only after that receiving generation understands what the duties and responsibilities are with inherited wealth, right? Just because someone's had a 30-year run of creating wealth with their business, for example, there could be something looming in the future that could really damage that wealth. And I think families that talk about this, that is what we call preparing heirs.
If you and pitching this with the COVID thing, this may actually put some credibility to the stories of my father having to deal with hardship and things. It's maybe just like you're saying, it's just a lot more relevant right now, and it may just take a bit of a shift back and make those stories more meaningful.
Yeah, I agree, Bob. And I think even beyond money, you will have clients, or you will certainly have clients and new clients who ended up on a ventilator and died, and they didn't have a will or a power of attorney or a healthcare directive. Like, this stuff is really personal. Like, smart people, accomplished people,
yeah.
who you would have expected would have the basics in place, and they didn't. And now these families are telling stories about how they wish they had listened to their advisors, listened and put in place these very basic good governance.
So one question came up, and it was about, I've never ever spoken about death, about wealth. I've never ever talked about passing on wealth or wisdom, and I kind of like the idea, but this is not in my comfort zone. Any comments, Tom, about how do I help and encourage these families to do that?
I liken this to giving a birthday gift. Don't get me wrong, Bob. I mean, I was in Chicago once speaking, and I was walking down Michigan Ave, and in the window I saw something that I knew would be perfect for my wife's birthday gift. It was a couple of weeks away. I bought it. I went home. I was so excited because I knew I nailed it. And do you think I could wait 2 weeks to give it to her on her birthday? No, I had to give it to her right away. And I thought to myself, why can we not muster the same kind of logic and excitement when it comes to transitioning our wealth? When we can work with our advisors and answer the question, how much am I going to need for my retirement and my late in life care? And then when we get a conservative number for what that is really going to cost, and then double it to really make sure that we're not going to run out of money, right? Double indemnity. And then we can still see that we've got excess capital. I, for the life of me, do not understand why we would not want to use a family meeting to start to make relatively small gifts, just like I did with my wife before it was actually required. And then to derive some joy of watching what family money can do to release potential in the next generation. Not just the gift, but the coaching and the feedback and the guiding and the storytelling and all of those things that are a pretense for what is going to come in a much larger way in the fullness of time.
Yeah, and all of us in our family situation, we're all going to experience something very different. I heard of an example just from a friend of mine saying, they gave their kids $100 each for Christmas, and it's totally up to you. One decided to give some of it away to a charity. The other wanted $100 for the candy, and on, right? So we never know, and hopefully, maybe years later, the candy junkie might think, well, maybe there's more to life than just candy, and it's all part of that growing process.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly, some family members will leave or make a living gift with the guidance that it be invested, or a large part of it invested, and maybe 10% given away to charity. And so this is all about values, passing on values, and passing on basic concepts about the power of compounding interest, and introducing the senior generation, introducing the next generation to their advisors. I mean, there's a lot of benefits to families where there's continuity of advice, multiple generations sharing the same accountant, and wealth advisor, and law firm. Huge advantage of families that share those same advisors. The planning that, I'm telling you, I'm preaching to the converted here. That the work that you can do is vastly improved when you have multiple generations in the same room.
Absolutely, and understanding the priorities of both sides, and understanding those missing links. So if there's an issue about fair market value and understanding the transaction happening in the business, now we're talking about the wills perhaps and the estate piece, but sometimes some of the participants in that room in that family meeting need to understand more of that other side. And I see that's a key role that I could play, or that our firm could play, to bring that information forward and to have it chat about.
Well, and I can tell you, Bob, that is not going to happen on its own. This is not a do-it-yourself project where you're going to gather your family at the cottage or around the campfire and broach this subject and dive into it. This is tricky stuff. And I just think that by having a professional, a third party in the room to guide the conversation and keep it on track and keep it light, this doesn't have to be heavy duty drama. It can just be a good family meeting with people who are good at facilitating conversations. What are we talking about? What have we been talking about, Bob? We're talking about the transition of surplus wealth. There are worse problems to have.
Oh, absolutely.
This is the right kind of challenge for a family to be weighed down by. It's a challenge. I'm not making light of it, but seriously, there are bigger problems in this world, especially now.
Absolutely. So here's a comment. I person say, I plan to skip a generation in giving most of my wealth to my grandchildren. I've already given my kids gifts and I think they have enough. I think I am just going to skip and go straight to the grandkids. Any comments?
So Bob, this is someone who equates estate planning with economic need. In other words, I'm going to leave my wealth only to people who need it. And so this is increasingly a challenge. I would say a problem when the obviously receiving generation is receives something and others their parents are skipped over. That can seriously undermine, especially if it's not done carefully and with lots of family conversation, that can seriously undermine the parent-child relationship between G2 and G3. When grandkids get money and then parents say to them, listen, we want you to go to university. And the kids go, I don't need to go to university. My grandparents just gave me $3 million. Go pound salt. You're not telling me what to do. I mean, you can start to see. And then here's the irony. The person who's making that ill-conceived gift is hoping to receive exemplary care from their children who now have a dysfunctional relationship with their own kids because of the way in which wealth was transitioned. I mean, that's why I keep coming back to this idea in Will and Wisdom that late in life care, long-term care, our health care is very much integral to our estate planning conversations. It really is the same conversation. The people we hope to receive care from are usually the same people who are going to be impacted by our estate planning decisions.
Right. So here's another comment. So my wife and I are in the process of updating our wills, and I think this goes back to maybe a couple of your comments just made, is equal fair. You know, in some cases, you know, some kids are good with money, some aren't. Maybe some actually made some bad choices in their lives and now can't think at the same levels. You know, there might be some substance problems, social, those kinds of things. Is this equal thing, how much do I need to be worried about that?
I think when people make estate planning a very emotional subject, they make emotional decisions. And much like business owners who confuse their passion for business with being emotional, emotions seldom lead to great decisions or great conclusions. What I would say to someone is, look, if you have some challenging dynamics in your family, be they overspending or addiction, it's actually possible to leave your giving decisions in equilibrium. In other words, you can leave an exact same amount of money to a high functioning child and a child with some serious spending problem. Absolutely possible and achievable. But they're going to need their advisor to do that. I cannot imagine once a parent dies, two children, one with a cocaine addiction and a child who's high functioning, appearing before a judge litigating over the validity of that estate. Can you imagine? Your Honor, this is absolutely unfair. My brother got the exact same amount as me. That's absurd, all right? What I can hear is a child who does have an addiction, who lawyers up and says, my parents never really loved me. I was never the favorite. My brother I was cut out of the will because my brother designed it that way. He had undue influence over their will. My parents made a late in life change to their will and they lack capacity. You see, yeah, is that starting to sound a little familiar?
It's sounding like lawyers are getting a good fee here.
Right. Equality will never end up. An estate that is built on equality will never end. I almost never end up in court. What I am going to say, though, is that where there are challenges, people need to work with advisors because there are solutions. And that's coming back to that question of trust. Trust can be used to protect or house that money in a financial construct that can be released to that person when they get healthy. There's terms of the trust. But listen, inherited wealth will either release potential or it will accelerate demise. No one wants to leave money to our children and then accelerate their own death because they have a problem. That is the opposite of what anyone wants for their family. And so so with estate planning, with the creation of wealth and with the transition of wealth comes responsibility.
Tom, I really appreciate you answering these tough questions. They're topics and issues that people struggle with, and they may not sleep at night trying to figure this stuff out. So on the same line, how do I pick an executor? Who should I consider? You have an ideal 1, 2, or 3 co-executors, or any comments?
Yeah, it's a super common question, and it's a great place, by the way, to start a family meeting. In fact, the very first family meeting could actually just have that one question on the agenda, and that may take an hour for a family to have a really great open conversation about who mom and dad are going to select as an executor. And what I'm saying in Willing Wisdom is, instead of mom and dad saying, okay, we're going to gather you kids here, and we're going to tell you how it's going to be, it's actually quite the opposite. Some of the best family meetings are where parents, the people with the control, the people with the wealth, are actually saying, we need to update our will, and we want to get your input. Like, what do you guys think? And sometimes they'll have a lawyer present, 5-10 minutes on what the duties of an executor are, and then they can have a really good constructive meeting about who they select based on facts and information, good technical information. Like, that's a high functioning family. Not the family that buries its head in the sand and just hopes that, money issues just go away because it's awkward. It's actually families that use their surplus capital to deepen family relationships and build mutual respect and trust. They work on it.
Right. I was the executor for my mom's estate, and the number of hours that I spend with banks just to close a bank account or to open a state bank account, it's not a fun thing to do. Like I really don't want to be executor for anybody's will. It's not a fun job. And if I know you've said this before, but if you're thinking that the money is worth it, like it's a high value paying job, well, I tell you, you start tracking the hours and the pain in the ass stuff that you have to do. It's not a lot of fun.
And then again, remember, Bob, if the decision about who we are going to select as an executor, maybe one child, one sibling, and not others, and then we keep that secret, and then the family finds out at the funeral home when the one child produces the will, because the funeral director is going to request it, right? Because the funeral director is going to want to know who the executor is, because the executor has the legal duty to implement final wishes. It's not kind of like a random, let's just show up and throw a party. There's a legal requirement. So often, while kids are grieving, they're learning that their oldest brother or sister has been appointed executor, and they're going to get between 3 and 6% more than the others. And this is all news, all being revealed. And listen, there are funeral directors that I've spoken to. The stories that they have shared are stranger than fiction. You would not believe the family fighting and battles in parking lots and in the foyers of these funeral homes when people go crazy, grieving over issues of money.
One concept that I've seen a few times in some wills, which I really kind of like, is that they actually name advisors in their will. And that might be a legal advisor or a tax advisor, just in case that there was, it's an indication that there is complexity here. Yep. And if you want help liquidating this stuff, and it pretty much tells everybody, I'm suggesting that this person or this firm or whatever it is your advisor for these areas or this topic. I think that's a really good way to make sure that everybody is aware that there are some people that can help out when there are some tough things to talk about.
And there will be some tough things to talk about. Certainly, the bigger the estate, the more complexity, family cottages, second homes, art, cars, there's businesses. I think the backup executor, backup power of attorney, which is often the case, the advisor, I mean, that primary executor is going to get exhausted. It is really great to anticipate that everyone knows that some of that work can slide to that trusted advisor. That trusted advisor who was at the family meeting where all this was discussed. You start to see how it all comes back together. We're putting a bow on this issue. And I just think that is That is the gift that we give family, introducing our family to the people who have helped us create wealth and protect wealth, and then ultimately that last piece, transition wealth.
Right. Tom, you've developed something called the Willing Wisdom Index, and it's a tool that we have purchased and we have it on our website. But tell us a little bit about that Willing Wisdom Index and what it's meant to do.
I'm so proud of this tool, Bob, because it has the potential to impact hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Canadians. Advisors like yourself, better advisors who are more tuned into this issue of estate planning, subscribe to this tool. So you're paying money for this tool to make it free for your clients. And it takes 8 minutes for your clients to fill out a checklist. And at the end of 8 minutes, they get a 20-page personalized report revealing the gaps in the estate plan and recommendations. Easy. No million-dollar words, no Latin. I have went to great lengths to strip out all the nonsense that intimidates people around this issue, to make it written in ways that people understand it, so they can make decisions as families and transition their wealth in a healthy, respectful way. I really encourage anyone who's watching this to request access to this tool. Just email you, and as I said, 8 minutes and your life will change forever, as will your family, for certain.
Thanks, Tom. So the tool, everyone, is on our website. You go to the seminars page, and right below the Willing Wisdom webinar box, there is a separate box for the Willing Wisdom Index. And it is confidential. You can send us a copy or send your advisor a copy if you wish. And I smile because I think this is one way to truly make your meeting with your lawyer most meaningful and least expensive. And same thing with your other advisors. It does certainly open up and tell you about the gaps. And I can tell you from personal experience that just having a will does not give you a very good score. So my score was only 47 out of 100. So I put in place things, Tom, that by the end of the summer of 2021, I hope, well, I'm not sure when I can get the score to, but it's going to be much better than 47. I'll tell you that for sure. I have a will. So it's not as though just having a will gives you a score of 90 out of 100. So I found it very useful when I did it myself, and I'll gladly share my learnings with our participants and our clients, and we can learn together and grow and do a better job at this. So Tom, once again, thank you for this session. Any last words from your side?
Yeah, I'll just wrap up and say, when you mentioned that these reports are confidential, I really want to underscore that. There's an old saying that all progress starts by telling the truth. And when we designed this, we knew that if people had to include their first and last name and all this personal information, no one would go through this checklist. People, because there are a lot of gaps in our estate plans. So instead of shaming people, we said, look, let's just make this completely confidential, anonymous. No last name required. If you want to use Elvis or Betty Davis, use it. No one is looking at your report. Good data in, answer the questions honestly, and this software is going to produce instantly a really, really valuable report that will help you reduce your legal costs, because you're going to have family decisions. You're going to make really great decisions before you go in to see your lawyer, having a really good idea what you want as a family. And I just think it's a great gift that you're sharing with your clients and your community, Bob. And I want to thank you for the opportunity today.
Thank you, Tom. I really do look forward to our continued chats. I know that since we've started this process, and it's been over about 3 or 4 months, but I do look forward to our chats, and we will be chatting soon again. Once again, everybody, thank you for joining. And if you would like your copy of the book called Willing Wisdom, just go on our website, hlh.com, and you can order your complimentary copy. We'll gladly send it to you. The index is there for your use as well. So we paid the subscription, so you get the your report. And if we can help you at all, please give us a call. So thanks again, Tom, and have a great day.
My pleasure. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.